Hey guys, I've got a really useful little game here that I played today. This is a 15 plus 10 rapid game. My opponent was Rockster from the USA, who's rated nearly 200 points lower than I was. But the point is of this game that I think it's a great example of how you use your pieces. Piece positioning. Okay, so what I want to do is let's work through the game, which I won comfortably, but at each point I want to be looking at where white's pieces are and how much opportunity they've got to control the board and to put pressure on your opponent versus black's pieces. So let's go straight in. So white opens with d4. I play my standard opening for black, which is this black lion. White's second move was b4, which is a bit odd. So what white's done there is pushed a pawn out towards the middle of the board, but that pawn is undefended. The d4 pawn is defended by the queen, you know. e4 is also undefended when you push it out, but you can quickly and easily defend that. It's not easy for white to defend this piece other than maybe moving this bishop out to d2 and blocking in his queen. So it was an odd move, I think, from the start. White carries on developing the knight, also double defending the d4 pawn. Nothing wrong with that. I bring my knight across, pairing my knights together. He plays h3 which has the effect of stopping my knight from coming in there, which is sensible. I push e5, takes, and now this is okay, right? So this is the bishop pushed to b2 is now bearing down on this pawn. So what we have is now two attackers on that one pawn, but only one defender, which is my knight. So I think I look at my options, okay, how can I defend the pawn? I could move a bishop out, and I decide, no, let's just push the pawn up the board and try and harass this knight a little bit. So the knight moves back to d2, right in front of the queen. Okay, there were lots of other options, of course. It could go that's safe, that is actually safe because it's defended by the bishop. So he's got lots of forward squares that he could have moved to, but he decides to move backwards. I develop my bishop and further put a little bit of pressure on white. The chess game is very often about who can put the most pressure on the other one, right? And we do this by controlling the board. Develop your pieces and point them in the direction that they need to go. Knights in particular, because knights are short-range pieces. They need to be up the board in order to attack. So yeah, of course, here I not only develop my bishop, but I just snatch up that loose pawn, of course, which is that just a reminder of why pushing that b4 so early in the game was just confusing, because it was never defended. Okay, so the black is now pinned. Sorry, the knight is now pinned to the king. White pushes c3 to get rid of my bishop. I move it back to c5, where it is eyeing down on the f2 square. Very often f2 and f7 are these squares where you really want to be pointing your pieces at, particularly early in the game. And if you can get, the classic is to get the bishop and the knight together, where you've got options of coming in with a knight with a nice fork, or you've got an option of coming in with a bishop. I mean, that would actually be checkmate. That's a smothered mate. The king has nowhere to go. So let's see what happens. White sensibly pushes a pawn forward to prevent that shield f2, let's say. Now I decide here that my light squared bishop isn't doing much at all. These two knights here are paired, so I'm not in a hurry to move these and separate them, because they're secure where they are now, and they're controlling a decent amount of space on the black side of the board. So I'm thinking it's no bad thing if I push b6, then it's helping to defend my dark squared bishop, and then I've got ideas of moving my fianchetto, my light squared bishop here to b7, where I would then have two bishops eyeing down on the white king side. And that's one of the principles that we want to be bearing in mind. Your bishops are great long-range pieces. They can attack right from the other side of the board. If I look at white's pawns right now, around the queen side of the board, there's no way that I can see white thinking about castling on that side of the board. Right? White's definitely going to castle kingside at this point. So, I want my bishops on my queen side, because that's bishops move diagonally, right? So I want them pointing, threatening down on the white king side. Okay, so this is my idea. White pushes a3. I fianchetto that light squared bishop, also helping prepare to castle myself. White comes in with an attack, which I decide to, send him back packing. He goes back again to his position where he's blocking in the white queen. I move my queen up to e7, so that's adding another defender to this pawn on e4 and also preparing to castle. White castles, I castle queenside. So opposite side castling tends to make for more active games. I want my king on this side of the board. Now let's have a look now. Let's pause and see what white has managed to achieve after, what move are we on? 13 moves. Okay, I have got both of my bishops here eyeing down on these squares. Okay, but let's look at white's pieces. Right, these rooks are not connected. They've got very little play. They've got one other square that they can move to each. This knight can actually move nowhere at all. All its squares are covered. The queen has relatively little play. Just 5 squares where that can move to. The light square bishop is actually, I would say, white's strongest piece at this point, but actually can't go there or there or there or there or there. So it's actually only got one square on the board where it can actually go. This knight can't move to there. It's really this is exactly what I want to be looking at in this game. Right, these pieces have been moving around. They've come out and they've gone back. Right, when I threatened this knight, yeah, it moved back in front of the queen. This bishop came out for an ineffective attack. I push my pawn and it goes straight back. Right. So what's happened here is white's pieces really are not fully developed. And I move there, castles. Okay. Now I have completed development, which means all my minor pieces and my queen are off the back rank. I have castled and connected my rooks. White has not completed development. He's still got the queen and the knight there on the back rank. Okay, so makes another minor piece move instead of, well, he can't bring out his other knight actually because it had nowhere to move to, so that makes sense. I really want to keep my two bishops working together, so I don't want to exchange at that point at all. So I move my bishop down where it's still pointing at that corner where the king is now hiding. White moves the light square bishop another time, so it's now looking down on this f7 pawn that I'm not too concerned about. I'm quite happy because I can, even if I lose these 3 pawns, what that's doing is that's just making way for my rooks to attack. So I really don't care if white wants to take that piece. I push my queen up to e5, which is a bit of a cheap shot, but I thought, why not? It's kind of improving the position of my queen, and I'm thinking that, okay, I've got the the threat of diving into h2 with an instant checkmate, and particularly also because I'm leaving that pawn undefended, I thought, there's a chance that my opponent might just think, he's left a piece, and just jump in without thinking and take it. My opponent was smarter than that, which wasn't a huge surprise. Okay, so now I move my queen across in order to attack h3. See, all of my moves, what I'm trying to do is apply pressure to white. Apply pressure. And white is having to respond to my move, so white is very much on the back foot in this game. White moves the king into h2 to defend that pawn, which is one option. I push forward with my knight. I see that I can move into there. I have an excellent square, which is a nice outpost there for my knight. And on its way there, I can also attack this undefended bishop. Right? That bishop is undefended. This bishop is also actually undefended. Right? My pieces are all defended right now. So, what happens next? Bishop comes in, which is a good move. Comes in there to e2, thereby defending this f3 square. And then I think, okay, let's bring in more attacks, more things for white to think about, right? So I push the h-pawn up the board. White comes in with an attack on the queen. I simply step out of the way. White tries a bit of a pawn push of his own, which doesn't give me any concern at all, because this is an isolated pawn. There are no pawns around it on the B and the D files, so this is not something that worries me at all. So I press on with my plan, right? And I really want to keep my opponent pinned down. So I'm threatening here to take, opening up this space. Then my queen has got more activity. White pushes the pawn here to f4, attacking my knight. I actually have the option, I can take en passant if I want to. I don't know whether I do that. Instead, in fact, maybe the best move here would have been to take with the queen on g3. I decided to take with the pawn in that instance, with check. So I'm forcing the king back. Yeah, so the king has to move across there. I then move my... Very simple things. It's just attack, threaten, right? Just move my queen across. I'm now threatening h3. White has to do something about this. Okay, so moves the rook in. I now think about manoeuvring my knight round. My knight is under attack here on there on e5, so I think if I move it round to g6 and then h4, that's another check. Okay, I'm expecting this pawn to get taken at some point, but like I say, this is not a bad thing. Pawns, your own pawns, can be used as shields against you. Okay, comes in with a cheap check, and I decide that capturing the bishop, now that the board's quite open, bishops are strong. So I decide to take, because I've figured out that if white captures with the pawn, I have the option of capturing the rook with the queen, then queen takes, then rook takes, then king takes, and that is a fair exchange, when no one's up or down. But I still have this lovely pair of bishops zeroing in right across the board at that open king side. And look at white's pieces. This knight here is doing not much at all. It's got very few squares that it can actually go to. This would be a good square, actually. The dark square bishop is currently blocked by the knight, although it is x-raying down on my rook on h8, so I need to be careful about that. This knight still hasn't even been developed. It's not been moved once. It's still at home, and this rook is still blocked in. Okay, and my king is over here. So just look how far all of white's pieces are away from my king. There's just very little threat going on. The queen's still on the back rank, and the king's now getting bullied around the board. So let's see how the game progresses. Instead of doing that exchange on h1, I decide to come in with another check. White captures the pawn, which is fine by me. And then I bring up, push my g-pawn now. So what this is doing a couple of things. It's defending this knight here, which is now defended 3 times. And also this pawn here on f4 is actually pinned. So that pawn can't capture because of the bishop. The king would be in check, so that would be an illegal move. White does come in with the knight as a threat, and then I realise actually if I capture with the knight, then that comes with check, so my queen cannot be taken because white has to get out of check. Captures the pawn. I capture back with check. You can see how this dark squared bishop here, that I think has only moved once in the entire game, but it's moved to a useful square, right? And this bishop is now instrumental in the game. So if you're thinking, you need to think about the value for money that you get from your moves. And there's good reasons why we say don't keep moving the same piece backwards and forwards, right? You want to put your pieces in useful squares and hopefully leave them there, okay? White's dark square bishop is now obviously eyeing down on my rook as well, so that's something I have to bear in mind. But I've taken this pawn again with check. The king cannot recapture. If the pawn captures, I come in with the queen that's defended by the rook, and it's looking like very, very messy then for white, because I can also move my rook over. It's all looking very desperate now. I'm only 2 pawns up at this point. King moves out of the way, and I think, well, why not keep going? These pawns are now controlling 1, 2, 3, 4 squares. Even though they're doubled up, they're actually pretty strong. And this pawn here is still defended by the queen, so it's another check. The king has to move again, and then I can come in and snatch the rook because the king has moved away, so it's only got 1 defender. Takes, king takes the pawn. I move my bishop across. You can see how these bishops working together kind of can almost squeeze pieces right across the board. White now makes a blunder by trying to block with the bishop, not realizing that I have 2 attackers on there. So I have the bishop and the knight and the rook. So I simply take, and then I've got a check on the king, and I'm also attacking the rook in the corner that hasn't moved for the entire game, like its neighbour the knight here. And at that point, white resigns. So what the reason I wanted to work through this game is really to get across this idea that when you move your pieces, try and put them in sensible positions where they are going to play a role later in the game. Your knights are happiest in the middle of the board, where they can get near the opponent's king and control lots of squares. The bishops are very often most effective hanging around in the corners at the sides, where they've got those long diagonals and can come in from a great distance and attack. Your rooks want to be paired together as early as possible after you castle. And that's it really. So, chess, it's all simple things, right? But it's the little things. It's the layering up of the pressure. It's the layering up of good positions. It's putting pieces in good positions where you don't necessarily know what it's going to do, but you know that at some point that piece could be controlling useful parts of the board. Put your bishops on the opposite side to your opponent's king, where they are looking at the dangerous side of the board instead of the useless side of the board. So remember, I had pawns over here. I didn't mind if those pawns got taken. That's not my vulnerable place. Yeah, my king was safe throughout the entire game. I was quite happy, quite comfortable, easy win.